Vlieger. Welcome at Vluchtroute, another special evening in a series of evenings on the refugee question in particular. We don't talk about crisis here. This evening will focus on both refugee exploitation as well as exploitation of migrant workers. They are not, of course, the same group, but they might both be prone to serious abuse, and we will talk about that abuse a little later. We made this evening in cooperation with Amsterdam City Rights, as well as with input of Vluchtroute International and the Salvation Army. I'm very happy with the number of people. Usually these kind of topics don't attract large crowds, which for Pakhuisjwijgen is not a reason not to host these kind of evenings. But of course we are very happy with more people being aware and invested in this very serious crisis. And before I talk a little bit more about the topic of tonight, I want to show you a very short video. So this is an American ad to foster attention for migrant exploitation. As a journalist and a writer who investigated the issue of migrant exploitation and especially sex trafficking and human trafficking a lot in, I guess, over a dozen of countries. I traveled and worked in 60 countries as a fly-in correspondent, and time again I will meet people who either confess to me that they were either trafficked or somehow exploited, or that I had the suspicion they were. So this topic for me gets very personal. And I want to share just some statistics. Of course, humans are never statistics, but statistics can show the size and the scope of this topic. And so if we talk about modern slavery, actually there is a lot of debate, of course, in the Netherlands now about the history of and acknowledgement of the slave trade. But we've never seen as many slaves as we do today. And the statistics vary, but according to the last official estimate of the Global Slavery Index of 2016, there are 40.3 million slaves today. Other statistics say somewhere between 21 and 46, but of course it's very hard to know because this is all hidden and in the dark. Please, you are disturbing. Oh, no, this is a very different topic, although, yeah, well, it's the next hall. Okay, well, you see, there are too many world problems to solve in one night. Getting back to my very gloom statistics, as for the 21 to 46 million of estimated slaves, 24.9, so around 25 million are people forced into labor. 15.4 million, predominantly, if not all, women are forced into marriage. Think about that, 15.4 million. And some of them are actually, quite a large group of them, are under 18 years old. Then 4.8 million, predominantly women and children, but also men, of course, are part of sex trafficking, and each year over 1 million children get adopted into sex trade. And these are just estimates. Of course, we don't know the real size and scale, and also we don't know how many people do work for such a low salary that and for so many hours and in such abusive circumstances that you might as well say they are modern slaves, even though they are officially paid. I'm wearing Nikes. I'm not making a good statement. We have Apple laptops there. I'm just saying. I name and shame. I don't mind. So, as for tonight, we have a panel discussion. I also really like to foster a lot of discussion. I do want to ask you, though, if you have a question, please raise your hand and wait for the mic, because this event is as well on live stream. And if you just shout out a question, you're not only disturbing the conversation, but people cannot hear you online. So for everyone to be included, use the mic. And now it's time to invite Annette Kouwenhoven. Do I say it right? Yes. Thanks God, I'm not that good in names. Of Amsterdam City Rights, who will give a more personal testimony and share some stories of people who were targets or victims of the exploitations we just discussed, and explain why Amsterdam City Rights wanted this evening so much. Annette.
Yes, hello, good evening. My name is Annette. I'm a part of the Amsterdam City Rights team. We're the basic rights team in Amsterdam, fighting for the rights of undocumented people to make it really an inclusive city, but which of course is a big struggle. Well, the background of this event, in the summertime we organized a city rights tour. We went by various locations in Amsterdam where undocumented people live. And we also visited one of the squats in Amsterdam Southeast. And there were many stories there of a group that we did not really have in our, how do you call it, in our sight yet. They came from southern countries of Europe. They had their own reasons to leave. We heard about atrocities along the way to the European continent. Camps in Libya, the rape and abuse, the journey across the Mediterranean Sea, and the human trafficking. Treatment in Europe, racism, exclusion, the lack of rights, no shelters, no access to medical or social care, no education. No work, no opportunity, make a decent living, exploited, working long hours with little to no money. Yeah, among those people were also people with a Dublinclaim, and I think Kevin, which I then met that summer, will explain everything about it. So I'll skip to some stories that we heard. And I'm also a part of the World House community, which is a center for undocumented people in Amsterdam. And during summertime, there were not so many people working there, so I was helping out as an ex-colleague also of them, and I was present at one of the intakes of a guy, and he was very much upset, probably ran away the same day, and he was keep on repeating to me, please get me a HIV test right away. I was in Italy, and yes, I had to work here in a small shop in Amsterdam. I could leave, I was locked up, I ran to the door, and the shopkeeper did not notice me, so I ran away and somebody directed me to the World House. But in Italy, this happened. I really need an HIV test. Please connect me. And it's a very short story, but it really struck me that, okay, in Amsterdam you're exploited, you're put, you're locked up, but something worse happened in Italy, we think. So there was no place in the shelter for him because he also had a Dublinclaim, and we don't have many places for people with Dublinclaim. So we placed him at a pastor in the house, but the pastor was completely overwhelmed by the misery of this guy, and we then found out that these people are so vulnerable that you cannot place people with this background at just a person from Amsterdam, which is not used to all the misery and pain these people go through. Then I had a conversation on the streets. One of the guys was living in the squat. I met him, he did not have any stable shelter. And I asked him, why did you leave Italy? And then he said, yeah, I was confronted. They accused me of raping a girl. I could not defend myself. They did not give me a lawyer. I was found guilty, but later dismissed of all charges. I did not do it. I did not rape that girl. I hardly knew her. But then the damage was done. Nobody trusted me anymore. I trusted nobody, so I decided to move on. There was no life in Italy from here. And this was also a strange encounter because I thought that, in Italy you would have a good legal procedure, but it doesn't seem to be the case then. Anyway, he's in Amsterdam, and yeah, that's also the side of Amsterdam. People love Amsterdam. They think it's a free city, that's a tolerant city, but it's not always the case because we have people on the streets. Also in the counselor's room, this story, I wanted to not tell it myself, but by somebody from our team, but she said, I cannot tell this story because it's too confronting. So there was a woman, she is from an African country, she's a lesbian, and they found out that she was. So then they took her to the police, and then they correctively raped her, the police guys. And her mother was so angry with her also that she wanted the woman to get her daughter out of the country. So then they arranged a ticket and a visa for her. She boarded the plane, and somebody sat next to me, but I did not dare to look. The plane arrived, and we walked through the corridors. I actually did not know in which country I was. The guy said, go to that desk, go to the police. But my experience with the police was not very positive, so I was very afraid. Okay, here you have a phone, he said. Call this number in a few weeks. They asked me questions, the police, and then they transferred me to a camp somewhere in Italy. I did not know what to do, nothing happened. So then I decided to call the number. The guy said, go to the entrance of the camp. A car came, then we drove a long time. We stopped at a house. It was in a city. It was dark. I have no recollection where I was. They said, go in, and then there were men. They took my belongings, emptied my pockets. They put me in a room. Now you work here, one of them said. A guy came in, another one. You know what I mean. And she broke down. I was really struck when I heard that story also, because I was thinking, how can we get a safe space for her? Is this human trafficking? I'm not an expert, I'm not an official social worker, but we get all those stories also as people that are not the experts. That's why I'm, of course, happy with the Salvation Army and with La Strada for their expertise. But how did you get from Italy to the Netherlands? What happened and who did this? I felt that we know so little and that she didn't want to tell everything right away, of course, because it's too painful. So all those stories, people living in precarious circumstances, on the streets, in the squats, in our city. Is Amsterdam becoming like any other European big city, like Brussels and Paris, with people in difficult situations surviving? How will the municipality approach undocumented groups? Is repression the next step, like other big cities? Or do we acknowledge the situation and address the issues? So I'm very happy that Kevin will explain something about the situation in Italy. And thank you very much for joining.
Thank you, Annette. So Annette already mentioned the name of Kevin de Sabata, who will be our next speaker. He is a lecturer and a research associate at the VU University, and I have to say it correctly, in ethics and law of global health. And he will explain a little more, especially about Italy, by the way, because you might wonder, like, huh, why are we talking about Italy suddenly, and what's wrong with Italy? Well, it's a very beautiful holiday destination, but it's also the primary gate for most refugees and large numbers of migrants to Europe, who then get stuck in this Dublin system that Kevin will all explain about. Thank you so much.
Good evening, everyone. I'm really happy to be here. So, as was anticipated, I am Italian by citizenship, and I'm a lawyer by background. At the moment, I work at the Athena Institute here at the VU University Amsterdam. It's an interdisciplinary department. We do all sort of things. Our mission is actually doing research and innovation at the intersection between science and society, which is pretty broad. And within this category, there is global health, which is what I do, but also in general policies relating to healthcare, science communication, environmental policy, and also studying the policy implication and social implications and health implications of the migration phenomenon. We have a Facebook and Twitter and a website, so if you are interested in knowing more about what we do, please look us up. So that's where I'm working at the moment, but so I'm a researcher and a lecturer, but I have a past as a lawyer, as a practicing lawyer in Italy, during which some cases about immigration law and refugee claims came my way, and also this experience as an Italian lawyer gave me a quite unique insight into the bureaucratic and judicial system of Italy. So what I will do today will be to try to give you an insight on how things flavor even of how things work or fail to work in Italy, because as we were saying before with some of the people who kindly invited me here, for people who are not Italian, it's sometimes a little bit difficult to understand why things don't work in our country, because on paper often we have very nice, progressive, advanced regulation systems, plans, but then nothing goes according to the plan. So why does that happen? It's not, I mean, in the Netherlands, probably you are used to dynamics in which you do have a policy, you have a plan, and then it gets implemented. In Italy, it's not like that. We do have a plan, but it's not a given that it's implemented. That's part of our creativity and Mediterranean spirit. And why is it important for people from the Netherlands to know about what happens in Italy? Well, first, because as it was said, Italy is one of the main gateways through which refugees and asylum seekers enter into Europe. Also, then these refugees move to the Netherlands. Also, there is in Europe quite a big debate on how the European system for reception of asylum seekers and refugees works. And the system has been receiving quite a lot of criticism, saying that it sort of ignores the problems of coastal countries like Italy, and especially countries from the north, like the Netherlands, have been accused of being too distant, not really understanding what are the difficulties faced by countries like Italy. But let's start. So it's also, again, because refugees at some point will and come to the Netherlands, it's also useful for you to know how the refugees problem works before it comes knocking at your door. Let's start from some numbers. So the graph on the top, it's about the total number of asylum-seeking applications in Europe. You see that in 2018, it is estimated that they were around 600,000. And this and the line that you see tells us that the phenomenon, while still relevant in numbers, is decreasing. There are less refugees coming into Europe, also because we made nice agreements with countries like Libya or Turkey so that they keep the asylum seekers from coming. So, though the media continues to talk about crisis, it's not that much of a crisis, but rather a phenomenon, a social phenomenon that needs to be governed. The other two graphs, the one on the left is about the numbers of EU migrants that arrive in, or non-EU migrants that arrive in Italy, and the other one is about asylum seekers, which is a particular category of migrants, and it gives us an idea. The refugees are, well, I might as well read it from there. 60,000 more or less, a little bit more, a little bit less. And they arrive in, the graph is about those who arrive in Italy, but we know that from Italy they move. In fact, if you see, quite a big amount of them, it's actually not in coastal countries, but in countries like Germany, France, and also you see the Netherlands there, you see Belgium, which is somehow a little bit strange because these are not coastal countries. They are not on the border. They shouldn't have refugees, in theory, right? But this tells us that people from Italy, once they arrive in Italy, they actually move to other countries, mainly because in countries of the north there is more prosperity, more occasion to find something to do and to find activities to carry on. But also, we know that some of these asylum seekers get sent back for reasons of competence, that we will see it in a minute, for reasons of competence in receiving applications for international protection. Before going into the explanation of the system, there is also another little bit of context that we need to tackle to understand better the situation. So, the first bit of context is that Italy is a peninsula. It's in the middle of the Mediterranean, so it's the natural harbor to which refugees which escape wars in North Africa can arrive. And here you have a nice, well, nice, an eloquent image of the war in Libya. So what's happening in Italy? There is this continuous flux of asylum seekers, which we see is decreasing, but the public opinion didn't notice. And so there is, the public opinion is increasingly hostile to this migratory movement. And this hostility is used by far-right, xenophobic parties to win votes, okay? People fear that they are being invaded by refugees, and so they increasingly move to the right. Also, other typical thing, as I was saying, is the Italian bureaucracy, very inefficient, and also the presence of organized crime, mafia. Okay, all this is within a system that is governed by European legislation that is quite inefficient. And it is inefficient, basically, because the European public opinion, in general, is not really well receiving when it comes down to try to change the system and make it more efficient, because it will actually require, for example, a distribution of refugees also in countries in which there is no such problem of refugees entering. So how does this European system work? Well, the European regulation for refugees and asylum-seeking claims is contained in the Dublin regulation, Dublin 3rd, and the criterion of the Dublin, this regulation is about establishing what member state is competent for receiving and deciding on applications for international protection of asylum seekers. The criterion here is that decides on asylum claims the country who has taken the fingerprints of the person, okay? So if you arrive in Italy, the Italian police takes your fingerprints, then wherever you move, you are always condemned to go back to Italy, okay? This makes the system quite inefficient, because moving people costs money, costs time. It makes it difficult for people to have a fair procedure, because if you are transferred to Italy and you used to live in the Netherlands, then you don't know where you're going to end up, where you have to send all your paperwork. Also, it creates the problem that families are often split, because maybe it's the time of the father to have their case heard, and so only the father gets transferred to Italy, and then the other members of the family remain in the Netherlands. In order to tackle this problem, a number of European countries decided to sign the Malta agreement, which says that within 4 weeks, asylum seekers will be automatically redistributed among the countries which have signed the agreement. The problem of the agreement is that it's just signed by Italy, Malta, Germany, France, and Finland, plus Spain and Portugal have voluntarily participated in some redistribution exercises. Yeah, all the other countries have said, no, we don't want to join, we don't want to be automatically allocated asylum seekers. And the reason, the official reason that has been put forward by various governments, including the government of the Netherlands, is, well, the numbers are decreasing. It's in a couple of years, the whole thing will be over. It's not worth to put in place a brand new system to cope with the problem. But suppose that the claim, the competence for the international protection application of a certain refugee is with Italy. These are the three forms of international protections that can be awarded or recognized to the person. So the first one is refugee status, if there is a case of persecution in the country of origin, and it leads to a 5 years renewable residence permit, and the person has access to work, free healthcare, social security, travel, right to travel, education, family reunification. Other form of international protection, subsidiary protection, if there is a risk of serious damage in the country of origin. Then if there are questions, I will explain what this means. Also in this case is a 5 years renewable, and it leads to the same rights. This permit is convertible in subsidiary in refugee status, which after 5 years gives the possibility to the person to actually acquire Italian citizenship. The last form, humanitarian protection, is for people who don't have the same big problems of the other two, but have had less serious problems in their country of origin, but still serious reasons for health and personal security, and leads to a 2 years renewable residence permit. And also in this case, there's right to work, access to healthcare, travel, education, family reunification. Yeah, it only lasts 2 years. It's not convertible in a refugee status, but it can be convertible in a work permit. I should have said, actually it was, because this form has been abolished in 2018 by the new so-called security decree that wanted to adopt a tougher stance on asylum-seeking claims. And so eliminated this one that was an extra form of protection for refugees. But the real problem of all of this is that in order to get one of these forms of international protection, there is a procedure that according to the law should last 35 days, and in practice never last less than a year. Okay, and this is just to go in front of the territorial commission that judges the claim and get the measure of international protection. If the claim gets rejected, then you can appeal with it, and it goes through the court system, usual normal court system, which in Italy has an average duration of trials, which is 6 to 10 years. By that time, one hopes that the war in Libya will probably be finished, so I don't know why the hell we're talking about it, you know? I mean, why is there even an appeal procedure in place, you know? It's never gonna see an end. So the crucial question at this point is, during all this time, where do asylum seekers stay? Well, they stay in these, this is, we're going to skip this in case. Oh, sorry. Okay, yes. They stay in this reception system. The first level of receptions are the centers for first aid and reception. That's where refugees end up as soon as they arrive. for the first basic things, checking whether they are healthy, if they are starving, they get food, etc. Then they get moved to accommodation centers and governmental centers for primary reception. Here they should stay 35 days maximum. In reality, they stay 3-4 years. And it's sort of a limbo, because here they stay while they are waiting that their application for international protection is approved. So they can't work, they can't really integrate into the country. And also, these centers are often overcrowded. There is violence inside of them. There is infiltration of organized crime. The second level of reception of refugees is the system of the SPRAR, which is the protection system for asylum seekers and refugees. And here, asylum seekers and refugees go after they have become refugees. So after their request for international protection has been approved. The system is, however, I mean, it sounds pretty straightforward. You know, 2 levels. There are centers all over the country. The centers that I've seen in themselves are not bad, in the sense that they took former resorts for holidays and readapt them for reception centers. The problem is that what happened? Well, it's half. Let me put it back for you. Yes, thank you. That they seem governed. Okay, brilliant. They seem governed by a little bit of a chaos. The numbers of people in it really exceed the capacity. And also these centers are often outsourced to companies that have often ties with the organized crime, which is another typical dish of the Italian context. Of course, it's a little bit. I'm gonna borrow a couple of minutes.
No, only 2.
Yeah,
2 more minutes.
Yeah. I'm gonna borrow a couple more minutes.
2.
Yeah. 2.
Yes.
A couple is 2, right?
Yeah, but
it's
not
a
okay.
couple
Anyway,
of 3
yeah,
people.
not for everyone.
Okay, yes. So it's a little bit difficult to explain to non-Italian what the mafia is and why it exists. The truth is that the mafia exists there in Italy before even Italy came. And where local people that have power over the villages and extended their power because the state was basically absent throughout the history of Italy. Because of the inefficiency of the state, basically the only efficient body of government, especially in some regions of the south of Italy, used to be the mafia. And of course, people like refugees, asylum seekers, are the most vulnerable people and can be prey to the mafia. And especially when the Italian mafia has signed a pact with the Nigerian mafia, so that we have cases in which sometimes the asylum seekers start from their country of origin having already an appointment with their exploiters. There is a place called Scampia, which is in Naples, and it's the biggest drug market and a human trafficking market estimated in the world. Near it, there is Castel Volturno, which is a place that has been entirely colonized by Nigerian mafia. People get there, they make them cross the water with eggs of cocaine inside of their stomach, and then they will be asked to expel them, and if they don't expel them, well, they will just cut them in the middle and take the eggs from their belly. Girls come from Africa and made cross the sea with the promise that they're gonna work as a hairdresser, and then, as the story Annette was reading, they are made to work as sex workers. And of course, the chaos that is in the centers for refugees in Italy throws these people in the hands of the organized crime. And this is, of course, not helped by the fact that the Italian government has been adopting an increasingly stricter stance on immigration, with requirements that are stricter and stricter to enter into centers. So people are left on the street, on the mercy of organized crime. It's something that happens because there are local dynamics already in place, but also because our attitude towards asylum seekers and refugees is so strict that we tend to leave them out of our system of protection. So it's also a little bit our fault. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. So, as to sum up this mini lecture that you just gave, please stay here for some questions of the audience. But so you have the Dublin Agreement, which forces people, as soon as they gave their fingerprints somewhere. So, for example, if police finds you in the street in Greece or in Italy and has your fingerprints, then you are stuck to Italy or Greece to decide on your asylum case, even if you are planning, for example, to go to Sweden and the Netherlands. There is something that you didn't mention that I think is very important. The position of refugees is not the same in every European country, and the facilities are not the same. So, for example, France gives you a sum of money, and then you have to make your own way. Holland provides in housing, and so on and so forth. So it can be very important for certain refugees to, for example, enter Sweden and the Netherlands, and not France, because they need certain medical supplies or psychological treatment that they wouldn't get in certain other countries. I think this is very important because, for example, you mentioned the ABC status and so on and so forth, but being a refugee in Italy, even if you're acknowledged as a refugee, is a total different story than being a refugee in the Netherlands and admitted as a refugee officially. Then the other thing, of course, is also that certain countries have special visa and applications, for example, for LGBTQ people, so lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, which other countries don't have. If you're a trans woman who has forced fingerprints in Greece, it's a whole different story than being a trans woman with forced fingerprints in Sweden or the Netherlands. These are very important things. But as to get back to the matter of exploitation, so we're going from the law perspective and the European agreement, which is very unbeneficial, to say the least, to both refugees and to southern European countries, because basically you're stuck with all the first entry refugees and asylum seekers. But so why exactly? I mean, you explained it a little bit, but just for more clarification, why are refugees so prone to human trafficking, sex trade, or other forms of exploitation? What happens? Are they got out, are people dragged out of the camps, or, what's happening there?
Well, the first reason is what I was saying that I mean, there are cases in which they arrive in Italy that they are already embedded in a system of human trafficking.
Okay.
How do you cross the sea? Well, you have people in Nigeria or Uganda, etc. They say, well, we take care of your transport. You get there, you get a job, etc. Then when you arrive in Italy, you discover that the job was not exactly what was promised. And another factor is that, there have been cases in which we had human, dealers in prostitutes and that were waiting for people outside, sex workers. It's that we're waiting for people outside of reception centers.
Just pulling them out, or when they move?
No, I mean there's no need. There's no need to pull them out because, of course, a reception center is not a prison. Right, so people have the right to leave they are free people. And of course, imagine if you are stuck somewhere and it's a foreign country, you can't work, you are in a limbo. And you have a fellow countryman that comes to you and offers you a job. I mean, you go for it, right? And then, of course, you enter in this spiral of organized crime to which it's difficult to disentangle. Third level is that there are members of organized organization inside the camp, and you have hierarchies, and then you have clans that form inside the camp. We talk about places that are made to host 300 people, and then they end up hosting 600, with a level of overcrowded that's unbelievable, and of course people are going to coalesce against each other and to ally with organized crime that is outside. Also because they need means to survive,
Okay, I see a question over there. Wait for the mic, please. There's another one here as well. I'll take two for now because there will be a whole Q&A session, don't worry. Gavin is not running away, I hope.
No.
Yeah, hi, I was wondering if you had talked about a really long appeal process for the, after the first rejection of an asylum case. I understand that in Italy there might be, while there's asylum seekers, you have somewhat of a temporary status, if not a full immigration status, maybe an identity document or something like that. During the appeal process, what's the immigration status, or is there a temporary identity document or a sort of pseudo-immigration status for people who are appealing, or is it just undocumented? And what happens when people move forward? If they move on to another European country, what happens to that? If there is a temporary status, what happens to it during the appeal process?
Well, I mean, you do have a temporary status, but it's a temporary status that doesn't allow you, for example, to work. Which is the big game changer, because of course it takes you out of society, and yeah, that's indeed the problem. If you move to another country, all your paperwork, all your procedures remain in Italy, so you have to be relocated every time.
For every procedure,
for every procedure, yes. So if you ask, I mean, this is how it works. You ask for international protection in Italy, then you've got to do, it gets rejected, you appeal, you've got to do something, right? Because it's 6 years. Then you move somewhere, but then they send you a letter. They send you a letter to your lawyer in Italy, and that your lawyer in Italy tries to find you somewhere and ask, I need that piece of paper, you send it over, and then you want to reunify with your family, so it's another application, you have to go down, you have to sign it, and blah, blah, blah. And in the meantime, you go around, I mean, we're talking about refugees, right? It's not people who have 10,000 euros in the bank account. They don't fly Ryanair.
Also, for these people, so do many get lost, like just undocumented, spread in Europe? Nobody really knows who and where. Yeah,
I definitely.
They're not really lost, of course, but I mean.
Well, I mean, we had case here in Amsterdam of people that were sort of pretty lost in the system, and there are, because of course I mean, imagine a lot of the people Annette is taking care of, that they are squatting, so they don't have an address. If your lawyer needs to send you a document, where the hell do they send? Also because you change every time. Maybe you are 1 month in Germany, one month in the Netherlands. So
okay,
so yeah.
One last question here for now, and then we will continue later.
Hi, yeah, so I was really surprised to hear that in the south of Italy, the mafia actually works more efficient than the government. Is the mafia also exploiting really people in a negative way there? And if so, what are the things that we can do about it, or are there any projects that are in?
Well, I mean, if I would have a solution to that, I would run for prime minister.
Yes, you will not be
and of
here.
course, and of course, never be elected, because Italian prime minister with a solution never get elected.
To the mafia, no.
We don't like it, Well, so the mafias in general are very, very sophisticated organizations. They are based on a very strong structure, normally cemented by rituals, by blood bonds and codes of honor. They patrol the territory, and yes, of course, they exploit people. You know, there are entire villages of Sicily in which, if you want to open a shop, you have to pay taxes to the mafia. Okay, it's called pizzo.
Okay, but Kevin, sorry, I think this is very interesting, but a lot of good documentaries on the mafia, and it's just not the topic for tonight. I mean, it's very interesting, fascinating, but there will be another evening in Pakhuis, and we will invite you. Don't worry,
fine.
Both of you. Okay, so, sorry, have to be a strict host here, because we have more guests. And Kevin, can you take a seat for now?
Yes,
Please, another
sure.
round of applause. So, for now, I would like to invite Faisal Sobrato. He is a spokesperson for the Indonesian Migrant Union, and he will give a personal testimony on his experiences as such. Faisal, please.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Faisal, but my nickname Fuad. They told me before when I come here, you should never use your real name, use your nickname. Because if you police find out or other people find out your real name, they will report you to the police. So I never use my real name. And almost 12 years, I use the name Fuad in every newspaper, in every introduction. But tonight, I use my real name. My name is Faisal Iskandar Subroto. And you can report the police, no problem, because I have a connection with the police also now. Yeah, I came in 2008. That time in December, and that almost minus 15. And in Indonesia is 30 degrees. You can imagine from 30 degrees, and then you come here in minus 15. At that time, 2 a.m. in the morning, I want to go to the hotel, but the hotel reject me because it's not open yet. So I must wait it outside until 6 o'clock in the morning. And then I don't know where to go, so I just sit outside the hotel until in the morning. Because the agent told me that, can I rewind? Why I come into Netherlands? Before I have a clothing shop, a t-shirt shop. I've been an entrepreneur for almost 3 years. I have a house, I have a shop, I have a 2 shop actually. And then somebody robbed me. How they robbed me? They usually take my shirt and everything, and then they pay me in the end of the month. But then suddenly they take almost all my shirt, and I almost also asked the bank to ask more money. But at the end of the month, the guy who always pay in the end of the month is not coming. So I must tracking him in Indonesia, but still not come. So I lost my house. I lost my 2 shop. So I don't have anything else. So I am very, really bankrupt. So in desperate time, one of travel agents said, come to me. You can come to Netherlands, you know. You have mechanic engineering. You can do the machine. You can work in the machine house. You can come to Netherlands. You know, one day in Netherlands is 100 euro. You can imagine one day is 100 euro. 100 euro in Indonesia is almost 1,500,000 rupiah. That means 1 month I work in Indonesia, 1 day in Netherlands. So it's very wow, you know, very beautiful, you know. You come over Netherlands, and we have the house for you, permit to work, and just you come over there and work. But I must pay 80 million. That's almost 6,000 euro. Yeah, and then okay. And I asked the bank again, other bank, and then okay, we can give you the money if you have something to pay, something to hold. So I asked my parent house. So I give my parent house as the guarantee of the money. So my parent, please, after you in Netherlands, pay every day the money so we don't have lost the house also. Yeah, okay. Then when I come in Netherlands, they say somebody will pick you up in there. Just wait outside the airport, and somebody will pick you up. They give me the number of the person, and yeah, until over there, nobody in there, so I cannot do anything. I waiting until almost 1 hour. Now I ask the taxi driver where I can find a hotel. Yeah, and then they give me to Slotermeer, but then cannot open the hotel cannot open for me. Yeah, so continue. So from over there, I live in the hotel every day. So I have only 2,000 euro, and then finish. Then I live in the street. I sell everything. I sell my food, even my cover. I sell it my cover also. So I only have my clothing in the mine, and I live in the street almost 6 months. In that 6 months, I try to find Indonesian people. I ask everybody, and then I found at the mosque, like a masjid in here, and I asked one guy, "Do you have no Indonesian people can help me?" And yeah, and he said, "Yeah, you have. We have one guy that maybe can you help me?" And that guy coming, his name Harry. He's like now, God bless him. He already passed away. He like my big brother, and I introduced him with him, and then he picked me up and bring me to his house, and in that time I'm very grateful. So I said, Harry said that you must work anything because you cannot work as in the company because you don't have a permit. So I work anything. Even I never work as a cleaner, but I work as a cleaner. You can imagine, I'm mechanic. I'm a dirty people. I never clean a house. So the first time I'm working, and that house is very, very dirty. Yeah, you can imagine the still, some poop in there, and what you call it for
Not
the
too
woman.
many details. We understand.
Yeah, the woman over there.
It's fine. We understand.
Yeah, so it's very, very dirty. And for the first time, I vomit myself. I cannot work. I said to my friend Harry, I cannot work like this. Yeah, you must. You cannot do anything here. This is your only job. If you want it or you don't, you must adapt it. So yeah, I adapt it. Yeah, I work as a cleaner. Also, sometimes I work as a massage. But it's very different when I massage here. Only 2 minutes, okay. And in here, when I massage man, that is very terrible idea also.
We also get the picture.
Yes, okay. So yeah, that's why. So So after that, then in 2010, I joined the warehouse, and I learned how to learn in Netherlands Dutch language. And in that time also we joined with FNV. And in FNV we make a organization between in the warehouse. Why we make organization? Because in 2011, 2012, 2010 until 2012, many Indonesian people pass away in the house because they afraid to go to hospital. Why they afraid to go to hospital? Because if they would go to hospital, they think, because they cannot speak, they think the hospital will report to the police. So many people die because only small sickness, like
The flu or something like that.
yeah. So in that time we are very confused how we do it, how we make to make us strong can survive here. So we make an organization. So we try to connect with everything here, every network in Netherlands. And thanks God, we have a connection for 250 network in Netherlands. Wow, it's very grateful. We connect with the hospital, we connect with the lawyer, also we connect with the police. Every organization here, we connect it. Because we want to survive in Netherlands. Because we don't want the people, Indonesian people here, they afraid to, they can go to the hospital. So they have to afraid again to become a sickness.
Faisal,
Yes.
do you have any estimate or any number of how many Indonesians would live in the Netherlands undocumented?
Yes. Approximately around 10,000 people.
10,000?
Yes.
Personal statement, I think it's ridiculous that you can be an undocumented Indonesian in the Netherlands when we colonized the country for 4 centuries. Just saying. It's just thought that I have. And as for those people, is there any wish or idea like to go back to Indonesia? Is it even possible? Because maybe they lost, I think, the papers at some point, or their passports are also like expired, or do they want to stay here and still get documented? Like, what is the general? Of course, every story is different, but are there?
Yeah, the story is similar like mine. You know, they are get fooled by the agent.
Yeah,
They
they get tricked into.
They get tricked, and then they must pay the debt from the bank and everything. Usually,
So you're stuck for life, basically.
yes.
Like
We
with your.
don't want to hear, but we cannot go back also because how we must pay.
Yeah, the agents back home.
No, not the agent, the bank.
Oh, for the loan of coming here with the.
Yes, and many people like that. And this desperate time, I have one guy. He's very desperate. Then he talked with the wall. It's very disturbing his brain because first he don't have a job, but he have a debt around 200 million rupiah. It's around that 20,000 euro, and then the family asked him, "Can you send the money?"
Yeah, where is the money? Yeah.
But he don't have a job in here. So then he lost his brain, and then he talked with the wall. And I meet him, and then last time his roommate called me because he wanted to hang himself.
So there are serious psychological issues as a
Yes.
result of this cycle, this catch-22 that they're stuck in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and many cases like that.
Aside of finding a medical care for these people, are you also with your union? Because you said you talk about FNV, so you are associating yourself with the National Trade Union. Are you also looking for better employment conditions for Indonesians? Not everyone is undocumented, right?
Yes.
there are also people who are documented but still exploited by their bosses.
The people Indonesian people who have document here, they also join us because they never know about the situation of the law of Netherlands law in the new. You know,
Their rights, their work
every years the law is changing, and thank goodness that we have connection with the politician in the Den Haag. So every new law coming, they report to us, and then we report to our member.
So that they know their basic rights.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much, Faisal. Thank you for your
Welcome.
personal story and for the work you do. We salute you. So now I want to ask the other two panel members, you're already here, to take a seat, which is Mill Colin. Colin. Is it Colin? Colin, yes, Colin. Legal case manager of Perspective on Rights of the Salvation Army. Thank you so much. Ook bekend als Leger des Heils. En Suzanne Hof van International Coordinator of La Strada International, a network against human trafficking in Europe. Thank you so much. Okay. So we heard first from Annette and later from Faisal some personal testimonies behind the statistics, because we have heard so many numbers and statistics as well. To start with you, Mil, of course at the Salvation Army you really hear these personal stories day in, day out, because you're dealing with people on the ground in Amsterdam, I think, yeah. Regarding refugees and undocumented people, what are the primary concerns they have or that you have as an organization working with personal cases?
Well, what we see is the primary concern of the people we work with is that they want, well, of course, they want to have a permit to stay here. They often need, they need a shelter, they need a place to stay, they often need food, and they have a lot of medical problems. There are a lot of traumatized people. And so our concern is to help them, to see what kind of legal perspective they have, and to see how we can help them with our social work, and if we can provide them with, well, the basic needs.
Can you handle the number?
Well, yeah, so far we see about 70 people in our project, and like average it's about 50 women and about 20 men. But there are a lot more people out there.
That's
and
what I
there's
mean.
a lot more people coming, for example, to the World House, and maybe they are not all victims of trafficking, but because basically we see the victims of trafficking.
Can you explain to the audience a little more what that is, the World House, because we heard it before as well, and what is it?
It's a place from the Protestant church, and it's kind of an open house for people who are out on the streets. They can come every day there, they get counseling, but also they are provided with food, and they have a place, a warm place to stay, to drink a coffee, and just to sit down and relax a bit.
And if we talk about the European perspective, do people also share stories of abuse that happened during their route? If it was on the Mediterranean Sea or in Italy or in the whole way to Amsterdam?
Yeah, they do. And what we see is that it starts already in their country of origin. And, well, they are involved in this network of traffickers. And often we hear stories about voodoo. So they have to swear an oath, which is kind of keeping them to the trafficking network. Then they go to Libya. In Libya, we hear a lot of horrible stories about abuse of people. And
so wait for the voodoo, because I know what you're talking about, but I guess some people in the audience are like, voodoo? Like first we're both talking mafia, now we're talking voodoo.
Okay.
So it means that you are that you think you have a spell, or that you will fall under a spell when you leave or run away or
yeah, people are brought to a special person, and they have to give some special, like,
oath?
they have to do an oath. They have to give some of their, for example, their nails or pubic hairs, and they are kept in a place. There is a lot of rituals going on, and it's very frightening, and it makes a big impression on people.
So they don't dare to break out later.
Yeah, that's the idea. Like, now you are swearing an oath that you will pay us back the money, that you will stay in our system, that you will do our jobs we tell you to do, and then people feel obliged to.
Yeah,
to do this.
And they don't dare to break out of
No.
that. Yeah.
No. So then they come to Libya. In Libya, there is a lot of sexual abuse going on, and a lot of forced labor, for example, but also torturing of people and asking ransoms. At the families at home, for example. They send little movies to the people. And then when you are lucky, you across the Mediterranean Sea, you end up in Italy, and they all got a phone number from the trafficker.
What you also said, right?
Yeah, it's what you also mentioned. And people see no other way than to phone the person, because they still want to believe in the idea, oh, I'm going to work in a shop, and then I will pay back this money.
Even after all they've been through.
Even after all those things, yeah. And then they are, forced to do this, and they also want to pay the money back. They say, I have a debt with my trafficker, and I have to pay, for example, these are amounts like 30 to 60,000 euros.
Is that because they're scared of what happened to the family that are left behind?
Yeah, also. Yeah, we also hear stories about families who are left behind, who get maltreated by other people or
threatened.
Yeah, threatened.
So, but if you hear this whole story, you need serious psychological care and be able to offer that psychological care, because this is like you're talking about events that are so traumatic to a person.
Yeah.
Can the Salvation Army really deal with the number of people that need this care on the scale we currently see in Amsterdam?
Well, yeah, we don't. I mean, we are not psychologists or psychiatrists, so we do refer people to other organizations who are specialized in this. For example, you've got in Amsterdam, you have Equator or Center 45, and we do our best to help the people in the way we can help them with our legal and social work we can do.
But if you could give any shout out to the Amsterdam municipality, what would you ask for?
Well, more places for people to stay, so they're in a stable place, and from there they can start to think about their lives and how to continue and which way to go, like stay in the Netherlands or go somewhere else.
Yes,
and it's only possible
and even just have a bed
if
to
you're
sleep,
not on the street.
Right?
Yeah,
yes.
That's it.
Okay, Suzanne, you work for La Strada International. It's based in the Netherlands, but it deals with the whole of Europe, right?
Yeah, it's a European platform, and currently we have 25 NGOs that are member of us in the Netherlands. That's Fair Work, which is also in the audience, and Comensa in Amersfoort.
Okay, and when you heard the lecture of Kevin, I think that must ring some bells, because you're also dealing with the issues of Italy and Dublin Clemens, I think.
Yes, I mean, everything that has been said is very familiar for us. Of course, we see the existence of people trying to come to Europe. There are different ways. They can be forced, but they can also come voluntarily because, as we just heard in the story, because the situation at home is maybe not the situation they want to remain, or they wish, like us, for a better life. So we see a lot of different people. We also do not only see people that are forcibly working in the sex industry. We also see people want to work here in the sex industry, but not under the circumstances. So we see a lot of different situations. And nowadays, definitely a lot of our members come to us and say we have a lot of Dublinclaims. In the past, I would say over the last 20 years, we have a Palermo definition, Italian, on the issue of human trafficking. So we always saw that people were offered at least a reflection period, a possibility to stay in the country, and now you see more, like, I would say, nearly a quarrel between European states.
Yeah, like just move them around, get rid of them.
Move them around. I mean, tomorrow there's someone coming from Denmark to the Netherlands, so you see that people start to move people around, and it seems that no one wants the migrants or the refugees. In the past, you would say, and I'm not saying that people can be very vulnerable but not being trafficked. So you cannot say trafficking is the worst, but it's a serious form of labor exploitation.
What are other forms?
Oh, I'll come to that in a minute, but one more thing I wanted to say is that you see that people, they end up somewhere, now I forget actually what I wanted to say, so I go back to your other question.
Excuse me.
People can be forced to do, they can be forced to work in the sex industry, they can be forced to do any kind of labor, forced services, they can be forced to smuggle drugs, they can be forced to steal, they can be forced to make, maybe they use the insurance, whatever you have had, selling newspapers, doesn't matter.
Or even selling their own organs.
Or even selling their own organs. The definition is from 2000, it exists 20 years this year. And what we see now, that we see all the different forms, of course, labor exploitation and sexual exploitation is still the issue you see most, also because the biggest focus is on that. But what we see is that everything is happening, different forms are happening,
Kevin, I heard a quote tonight, I thought you would actually use it in your lecture, that humans are more profitable than drugs.
Yes. Yes, it's a title of The Guardian, thank you. Yes, and it sort of refers to the big business of refugees reception in Italy. It's a mechanism. I mean, an example of how this mechanism works is that the Italian state, outsourcing the management of reception centers for refugees, gives to the company who takes the tender 35 euros per day per refugee. But we had reports that of these 35 euros, a small part goes into giving food and shelter to refugees. The rest is pocketed by the people who receive the money, and so by these organizations that are often connected with organized crime.
And so it's also profitable, of course, to put more people in a facility, or won't they get more money if they put more people?
Oh, no, yeah, of course they get more money. It's profitable both to put more people into the facility, but it's even more profitable to pretend that there are a lot of people in a facility that are not there. Italians are great, when it comes down to crime.
It's you saying it, and not me.
I know, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we are creative in many things, both the good and the bad. The mechanism is that, of course, you have migrants that get into these structures and into these centers, and they get registered. But then, of course, they leave, or they might be relocated.
But officially, they're still there.
Yeah, well, they're not erased by from the list. So they still claim that the 35 euros per
But that makes it also very hard to track down the people where they are in fact, and if they are attended to, or whatever.
Yes, that's indeed, it makes it difficult, yes.
Are there some questions in the audience? Yes, a lot is what I figured. Max,
yes,
this is your daily workout.
You tell me, who can I go to?
The first one here.
Thank you. All of you spoke about the horrific stories about refugees and about the European Union corruption, because it's not about the competition of the countries. This country is better in immigrants than the other country, but it's about the European Union. It is corrupt by itself, and the way that European Union continuing to kill people because of money. Why the European Union cannot stop destabilizing the countries rather than bringing people here and not taking care of them. So it's like we, as immigrants, we see the way that European Union works. In Niger, there's a camp. In Khartoum, there's a camp. In Libya, including in Italy, and the way that immigration, became like market to people, especially in Europe. So what kind of NGOs like you, Kevin or Susanna, you mentioned there are 25 NGOs that they are really working hard, and it is not about only shelter or giving people food or migrants, but it is also about empowering refugees. What kind of action is those NGOs are taking against the different governments in Europe to stop European Union from sending weapons, guns, to kill and destabilize the countries of the people? So nobody wants to come here in Europe, but they are forced to come. European Union bringing them and not taking care of them.
Well, actually, the European Union isn't even bringing them.
Because
They
they are
have to
destabilized.
get here by themselves, and then they might get asylum. But I understand your question.
Because they have no place to live there. They are destabilized. Their country is destabilized, burned by fire. And they have no place to stay there. So they must came in Europe here. So when they came here, they neglected and they thrown on the streets.
Okay, we get it. Suzanne, do you have an answer to this? Like, are these NGOs only taking care of the problem as it is, or also trying to lobby and negotiate and push for action with governments and, of course, government involvement in, for example, West Africa, North Africa, Middle East? We know the countries and the countries that were involved there, which is a good point.
Yes, actually, lobbying advocacy is a major point. Although I have to say that we focus in particular on human trafficking, these NGOs, and then we, of course, follow also related issues like the ones you mentioned, like the ones we heard, like the issue of migration, the issue of political conflict, the issue of social and economic root causes that all leads to the fact that people come here, they are badly informed, as you said, they are very vulnerable, they're debt bonded, and then they're in that situation. We, in particular, lobby the different European governments, including AU, OSCE, UN bodies, who also have action plans. But of course, the issue of human trafficking, the issue of labor exploitation, unfortunately, I have to say this, it's like solving poverty, it's like solving a lot of other issues, and I think we have to be realistic. We cannot solve this in a day, even though there are some governments and some governmental actors who are willing, because actually the issue of human trafficking is something that we get attention for, but there's not much attention, as you also heard. There's still not much support for migration. We call it a crisis, as we also heard, so there's not much rights for migrants, and that's what we also see. A large group of people that become trafficked are migrant workers. So yes, we lobby also together with those 25 NGOs, also with other organizations we work with. We have a large network of people to follow. For example, we work closely with PICAM, Victim Support Europe, who work specifically also undocumented migrants, and we also follow migration policies. But here you see already the example. We have Dublin 4, maybe we'll get Dublin 5. They still cannot agree, even on Dublin. They cannot agree on common European asylum systems. So yes, we can also not change it, and you know the current political power. I mean, we see a lot of struggle, we see no agreement, and the whole Dublin issue,
The problem is, of course, you have a very fair point, but to talk about the geopolitics now and why people move in the first place is unfortunately another evening, although I totally see the point, but for now, we're dealing with the topic of refugees and migrants already in Europe for no matter what reason, voluntary, non-voluntary, forced by war, forced out of economic despair, forced out of any other reason, maybe just for a better and happy life. Because if I want to work in South Africa tomorrow, I probably can. So why can't they the other way around? So but your point is taken, and it's even more complex, like even us polluting the country leads to new refugees tomorrow by climate crisis. So it's an endless thing in which we all care collective responsibility, and that's why we're here, at least to feel very guilty. Next question.
And there is Stop Arms Trade. If you stop wapenhandel, if you Google that, they do that in the Netherlands.
My question is for Kevin. So I think it was really telling that the host had to correct you about certain issues because you said something to me and I thought to myself, oh my God, that's kind of problematic. You said places essentially that are landlocked, so Holland, certain parts of Europe, etc., they wouldn't have a high number of refugees because there's no sea. Did it ever occur to you that not all of them come into places via sea? They could actually fly. Like, for instance, you could have somebody who was involved in politics from Colombia and they said the wrong thing and then they have to file for asylum, etc., etc. But my question is, with that being said, how would you respond to the critique that you're a privileged Italian liberal that is using this topic to enhance your academic credentials?
Okay, wait. One second.
Sorry.
As a host, first, I want to do respect and protect my panel members. I get your point, but it's a very personal attack. And for me, I will ask you to answer, but for me, I do want to respect the work they do and the engagement they have with the topic. And I think even though this man might be Italian, he could be a professor and study it, right? And I think he was quite critical of his own country. Also, I wasn't critiquing him, I was adding to his speech, but I was thinking of the same issue regarding people coming with planes, and I spoke to many refugees who came with false passports or anything else, or even their own passport and just got here on plane, of course. Not everybody takes a boat. But I do want to respect my panel members.
No, I mean, that's no problem whatsoever. I think it's actually a very fair point and a very fair question. I mean, on the first point, on the statistic, yes, it's true, of course. I mean, when we talk about statistics, it's about seeing the wood for the trees, and of course, the fact that they are not on the border, it doesn't mean that refugees cannot come, indeed, by plane. My point was more about the fact that, it's about the movement of refugees from border areas to sort of countries in the main sort of within Europe that don't border with extra-European countries. But it's of course you are absolutely right. There are things there are people that can cross by plane. So of course the number. I mean it's we are talking about big numbers and seeing the wood for the trees. So yeah, that's your point was certainly correct. And I mean, one could say that I'm a privileged white Italian man that is using the issues of refugees to enhance their academic credential. Well, I don't think it's a bad thing. In the sense that, I mean, every one of us that has a job, and we all do our job, being it a researcher or a lawyer or a doctor, and if we do our job well, this enhances our credentials. What's really the important thing is whether we do things that are at least honest or try to portray a reality. Of course, I'm a white privileged person, not because of my fault, and of course I've been observing this phenomena sort of from outside because I'm happy. Well, thank God I'm not feeling it in first person. I just found myself looking at the problem as a lawyer, and then it happened to me sometimes to study it as an academic. And I've been saying, well, I've been asked to say what I think, and I said, and I said it. You know.
The thing is, okay, I do want to finish this though. I think for me, because I feel responsible as for Pakhuis Zwijger. We invite people that do their job and do the job well and take the privilege that they have and turn it into proactive responsibility. Because you cannot blame this man for being who he is, but you can blame him for not doing his work well. But I think he does, or at least if he doesn't, you will definitely correct him. Now, I would like to turn to the next question.
Yes, but I think also there is a very important point here, that this is exactly the criticism that we receive a lot of time, especially from in Italy, from far right parties, in which they say, well, you talk about including refugees, etc., but you stay in your nice apartment, and the problem is the problem of someone else. And what I do think is that the problem is indeed that probably not enough privileged white men pose themselves the question of what are we going to do about this problem. It's not a problem that concerns unprivileged black people or colored people against white people. It's a systemic problem in which we're all together, and despite our previous lives, we should also use our technical abilities. So if you are a lawyer, a doctor, etc., you use your professionality to try to tackle it in a rational way. Okay, because beyond the ethics is about the future of our society and whether our society can progress in a way that is harmonic and it can guarantee prosperity to everyone. You know, both the white privileged and the colored unprivileged.
Okay, next question.
Thank you guys for spending your time here. I'm sure this is, like, I think it's voluntary. I don't really know, but I appreciate it.
It is.
Well, there you
He's
go.
not getting
Thank
paid
you
for it.
so much.
Well, of course not.
So we hear about all this stuff, and it's heartbreaking, and it just makes you feel so helpless as an individual. But, like, what can private citizens do? Can they volunteer? What organizations can they look online to
Vote.
find these things?
Vote.
Yeah, that happens like
That's
once
the
how many
that's the
years
one big
though,
political
but-
thing. Okay, Mil, do you have some practical ideas?
Yeah, I
We
do.
can all join the Salvation Army. Still looking for volunteers.
Yeah, you can. Of course, there are organizations always looking for volunteers, and you can ask the Salvation Army, but also the other ones mentioned, like the World House or Amsterdam City Rights, I think. And
Still looking for volunteers? You still looking for volunteers?
yeah. Yeah, and there is one, it's maybe important to mention here, there is one network in Amsterdam, it's called Code Red, and it means there are private people who offer spaces in their houses, like a room, or when they are on holidays, or to offer to people who are out on the streets and who can just stay in a room for a while at least, and have some nights of shelter. And they are also always looking for people to give their rooms or houses, or...
May I also suggest just something very daily thing, not as a solution, but as a starter? Start talking to people who are considered homeless. Just talk to them. Acknowledge their existence. Say hi. Say good morning. How do you feel today? Make them feel human again as they are. But we will talk more about the call to action later. Are there more questions? Yeah.
Thank you. I had a question mostly to Kevin because I'm so interested in Italian context, but maybe Meo or Suzanne can also answer. And it's about what are people that have moved from Italy, who were trafficked in Italy, then moved to the Netherlands. Now Dutch authorities say, well, if you file a complaint with the police, you can do that in Italy. We hear a lot that people say, well, I cannot go back to Italy. I cannot go to the police. I cannot go back. Can you say a little bit about why that may be? Why is it for many people not possible to go back to Italy and then file a report at the police there and get protection? What is their fear specifically?
Well, the fear is to go back to the exploitation circle from which they escaped when they escaped from Italy. You know, if they were exploited in Italy and they were embedded into a criminal organization, of course, moving away gives you a little bit more protection because maybe they can't get at you. You know, once you get there and they know it, well, that's the moment you get shot. Sorry to put it that bluntly. And of course, then the objection is, yes, but if you go to the police, they will protect you. Unfortunately, at the moment, many people don't have enough trust in the police because there are a lot of people in the protection system, for example, witnesses of mafia crimes that have been found by the mafia and shot. You know, in general, living under protection is a pretty horrible life. You can't move, you can't go out, you always live guarded by policemen, so it's probably preferable to be in a foreign country and live a little bit more of a normal life, hoping that they will stay. Your exploiters will stay in Italy and you stay here.
Suzanne, I have a question to you, and then we'll get back to the audience. Faisal said that many people are scared even to go to the hospital when they have the flu or anything else. So what about going to the police then to say, hey, I get exploited by my boss, or I got trafficked, or any other horrific abuse? is there a good system in place? Or if I would go to the police in the Netherlands, for example, would I be deported? What would happen to me if I was a victim to human trafficking, for example, and I wanted to go to the police for that?
Actually, it's an interesting question because we talked about lobby, and this is one of the issues that we lobby for, safe reporting and complaint mechanism. And what we see in particular also with the organization PICAM, Fairwork will also confirm this, is we still see that a lot of people do not safely dare to report. I must say that...
Can you safely report though?
Actually, funny enough, is Amsterdam was the best example for Europe because actually there were some police people, and there's also... Losses here in the audience who was also following that and monitoring that situation. So Amsterdam wasn't a good example that they said if you report you don't have to fear deportation. In general, however, we see that also a lot of people that, for example, work somewhere, maybe work irregularly, then are confronted with the labor inspectorate, maybe do not get adequate information, might still fear to be deported or detained. And so it's still not completely safe.
And did it change in Amsterdam? Because you said Amsterdam was a good example. That sounds like it no longer is.
There's maybe someone here.
Yeah.
In my experience, in Amsterdam is good, but when they have a problem, they put it in Rotterdam. And Rotterdam was cruel than Amsterdam, so in Rotterdam, the people will return back to their country. They deported.
So now we even have this koehandel between cities. This is getting so tiring.
Yeah, and actually this comes back to what we hear all the time. It's between legislation and gaps in implementation. According European legislation, victim directive, other directives, people should have the right to safely report, should have the right to complain against their employer. But if they work irregularly, they're not supposed to work, they don't dare. Not only they lose their jobs, but very often they also lose their housing. Some people live in the house of their employers, for example.
Another catch-22. Question.
Many or the most of refugees, they came from an Islamic country like Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, Pakistan, with lots of different ideas about the culture, about women. Because of Islamic culture, the man is here, woman is here. Or the punishment, you must cut the hand of somebody who steals something.
This is a very black-white version of how people would all consider those things, right? Not every Muslim
No, I'm not
would
talking
say
about
that.
the people. I'm talking about the sense, the kern of the culture of the religion. That's it. And my question is, do you see this as dangerous for society in the future, the culture, conflict between the culture? I'm not talking about people. I'm talking about the true culture I'm wondering what you think about this.
Who?
It's a conflict between the two
No,
cultures?
who would have to comment on this question?
Both, all of you?
All three?
It doesn't really matter. I would like to have an answer.
Well, first, this is not Samuel Huntington's Clash of Civilizations. We are still talking people. So people would bring that culture, right? Not the culture would come itself, like a package.
No, I think...
so people make of Islam what they make of it, and most people who flee the country don't really come here then to see women or people being cut the hands off or anything else, and even that doesn't happen that much in Islamic countries. And by the way, I'm not a Muslim, so I'm not saying this as an offended Muslim, if anybody thinks so, but I'm just saying out of clarification, I really wouldn't like to go in this discourse of Muslims having a certain culture that makes them unfit for Europe in general. I think this is one of the reasons why we have this issue in particular.
No, I'm not talking about people. I talk about some culture of some idea, and some people get to this idea and they think this is the right way.
Maybe I can react with two things.
Yes,
Firstly, of course, a different culture. I mean, the situation of women, for example, that could be a root cause for human trafficking. Secondly, of course, what we often see more in general, that there are cultural background reasons why, for example, people sometimes think that they deserve not more pay, or that it's normal that they work more than 12 hours within the home of a diplomat, for example. So we do see that culture plays a role. However, and it's even sometimes difficult for us to tell to people, and I think Meo can confirm, that you are exploited, that you are trafficked, because most of the time the people that are in the severe situation do not recognize it. For example, if you have someone who works in Bulgaria where they earn much less, and then they are identified here as an exploited person, or maybe from another continent, then people would also not realize. They say, I earn much more than when I used to earn back home. Same also for the person from Indonesia. And then it's very difficult sometimes to get them recognize that they are trafficked or severely exploited, and that we do not tolerate it. So in that sense, in the Netherlands, we follow the Dutch, let's say the Dutch traditions, cultural, and we try to follow the Dutch labor law. But in practice, of course, it's still difficult.
This was not an answer to his question, but I like where this is going. Mio, can you add to this?
Well, I can confirm what Susanna says, actually.
So people are not even aware that they are exploited according to the rights that we have here.
Yeah, that often happens. And what I also hear often with my clients is this debt they have, and they are out of the exploitation situation, and it's years later, still no permit, no nothing in the Netherlands, still trying. And then people ask me, Meo, do you think I should still pay back this money, this amount for the travel? Like, how much debt you still have? Yeah, well, 20,000 euro.
No.
Which is, yeah, exactly, which is, yeah, really.
But people still feel that responsibility and
they do, yeah.
Wait, Mike.
I think they also, because of their religion, they want to pay it back because they believe they have what you told before about the voodoo.
That can be part of it,
Yeah.
but I also heard it from people when there was no voodoo at stake, but they do feel a large responsibility.
An obligation, kind of.
Yeah, they do, yeah.
Even though these people were just criminals, basically, but not in their eye. Right? Those fake agents with fake work permits, with fake everything.
Yeah.
And people very often do not know that for example, for recruitment, you cannot ask money. Like the ILO, the International Labour Organization, is saying it's not allowed to have people making debts when you recruit them and you offer them a job. But people are very not often aware. And as you said, even though they're criminals, they still wholly believe that they have to pay back this money, especially if they borrowed then again from other people in the village.
Is there another question? I think it's going to be the last one, given time.
Hi, this is for Kevin. 3 very short factual questions, actually. You mentioned that humanitarian protection, the third layer of status you could get in Italy, that is no longer granted. Yeah. What happens to the people who received this earlier on? Can it still be extended, or it just ends for them?
So thank you very much for the question, because of the lack of time I couldn't go into detail into that. Yes, it has been eliminated in 2018 as a form of protection. Those who had it can convert it in humanitarian, a subsidiary or a refugee. Then those who don't convert it, they simply stay out. That's the big problem of the reform. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Here, let's slide again.
Yeah,
3 factual questions. Second.
Yeah. The second one, I quite often meet people who have a refugee status in Italy, or one of the 3, and they come here because they don't like being in Italy, either because there's no work or because of racism, or both of them. Yeah. And they're very disappointed that they're not allowed to work here. They can just visit, but they're not allowed to work here. And they think, well, I have a residence card for Europe. So it counts for all European countries, and that's not the case. Are people informed about this? Because this has nothing to do with the Dublin Agreement. It just says you have protection in Italy, so that's where you can live and work. Yes. And as long as you don't have an Italian passport, which may take, I don't know, 10 years, 15, you cannot move freely to another European country.
Exactly. So the system for the distribution of competencies is uniformed, but the international protection system is still state-based, and this is actually a political choice that is made by the European Union. You know, it's if all the 28, soon 27 member states gather together and say, well, let's make a uniform system of international protection so that we don't have this problem, but well, that's going to happen. But at the moment, it's not happening.
Is it the same with the Netherlands? So if you get a refugee status here and you're acknowledged that, can you then work in another country, or also only in the Netherlands? So it's in every... Okay, so you're stuck to that country, basically.
Yeah, because you're not a citizen, yes. You are someone...
Third, last factual question.
How long does it take to get Italian nationality when you're a refugee?
Well, if you are... So it normally takes 10 years. When you are a refugee, it takes 5.
But then you need to be a refugee first, and that already can take years.
But then you... Yes. I mean, I have to say, if the application for refugee status goes well the first time, you know, after a year and a half, you have it, which is not a short amount of time, but still, you know, if it goes wrong in the sense that it gets rejected, then you have to appeal, and then you go through the court system, 3 levels of judgment, 2-3 years for each level of judgment, and a lawyer that works for you.
That's the
well.
moment we say, Mamma Mia. Okay,
Exactly.
So, Suzanne, call to action. People now feel, of course, very frustrated with this stupid system, and they want to act. What can they do? We already heard some of the suggestions, but...
Yeah, I mean, that's also it. I would say don't start an organization yourself. That's what I very often hear, that people come to us and say, we want to start another organization. Rather unite and work with others. I would also make it more difficult, more different is look around you. You said already, like, engage with people you see in the street. Now it's very difficult because you always say identify people, but then also ourselves. You cannot easily estimate the situation a person is in, but be aware also, who do you pay, what do you pay your cleaner, where do you buy your clothes, all those kind of things, of course, you can do, and make also our governments aware that we feel that everyone should have equal basic rights, whether you're a refugee or not, and that's something else that has to be changed. It's not only Europe and the outside world, but also within Europe. There's an enormous gap in income level. In Bulgaria, you earn about €250 a month. So we have also a lot of Bulgarians coming here. I mean, if that's not going to change, if there's such an unequal income system, then people are also voluntarily working below the income level in the Netherlands, which is also another
Because
circle.
it's already an improvement for them, obviously.
Yeah.
All right. Meo.
Yeah, I already mentioned some options of what you can do. And so...
We can pray. Okay.
You can.
As for Kevin, you said vote.
Vote.
Any particular parties that you like to recommend?
No. No, I won't fall in that trap also because I don't know enough of Dutch politics to actually recommend one party.
How can we give more European pressure? Aside of the Dutch, okay, we can vote, and we have, of course, European. Are there certain blocks within the European Parliament that promote better refugee and migrant resolutions?
Well, the problem is not at the European Parliament. The problem is at the Council. At the European Council.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, brief recap, you know that the EU works with the European Parliament and the Council. The Council is representative of European governments, okay? Every time, including now when now there is a revision of the Dublin system, which is not going through, basically. Every time there are talks about let's change the system, let's make it more fair, let's divide the burden of reception of refugees among all the 28, soon 27 member states. National government says, no, I've got the previous engagement, you know, Amsterdam is foggy, Copenhagen is rainy, can't do that, you know.
So they're postponing it. Yeah.
Why? Because us, the public opinion of each country, puts pressure on them for keeping the refugees as far as possible from the borders of their country. It's not that we hate refugees, we just don't want them in our backyard. So that's actually it. That's why I say vote. Read. Well, first of all, because I see a lot of young people, I would say vote. Whatever you do, whatever party you do, you vote for, vote. Because the problem we are having in Europe is that we are ruled by an elite of octogenarians, privileged white, middle class, who cash their pension checks
but still want to keep working, unfortunately.
Yes, and under 30 people don't go to vote, so their opinion doesn't count. And then read the program of the parties, look at parties that propose a feasible, workable inclusive reform of the immigration system at the European and at national level, and talk to people and have conversations, meaningful conversations based on arguments, facts, data, about how we can change the system, and why continuing to behave as if the refugee problem is not our problem, but it's just a problem of the people that come here.
Last statement of Suzanne.
Yeah, just one thing we should not remember, that maybe you say maybe we don't want refugees, which is already a bold statement to make, but actually we want a lot of migrants to come to work to Europe, and we want cheap and exploitative labor, so we also have to take into account this.
Yeah, there's a
issue.
huge economic interest in the same time maintaining the system. Oh, okay. Last short remarks by you two. Faisal, you first.
Yeah, I just want to say, we can try and make an example. In Amsterdam, we make a talk with the people and we blow up via YouTube.
Oh, you want to make that?
Yeah, we can make that and then make an example to other country. That Amsterdam become like this, why you cannot?
Okay, I like that. So let's get viral.
Yeah, I think information is very important, so that people really know what's going on, what are their rights. And I think that's really lacking now in Amsterdam, at least. That's what we see. We have teams going out to different locations informing people, but yeah, that's what we also need volunteers for, you know, just to get information at the people so that they know what their rights are. That's very important.
Yeah, all right. Well, that's very clear, and that's very feasible, I think. All right, I want to thank all my guests and all the parties involved, the Amsterdam City Rights, the Indonesian Labor Union, the Salvation Army, La Strada, and the VU University. I have two recommendations regarding modern slavery. Please check the websites of Freedom Unite and A21 campaign, who both really work very actively on fighting against modern slavery, including marches and all kind of voluntary work, but also they just simply need money, because it costs a lot of money to get people out of the system and get them situated in a good and safe position in society, whatever society that is. I want to thank you all. I also want to thank Max de Ploeg, who was the program maker of this event. I can see that there were some emotions and some strict questions. Unfortunately, I'm always stricter. That's my duty as a host. If you have any problem with that, you can talk to me later. There is a bar downstairs where you can drink halal and less halal drinks for everyone, and ask some more questions. Thank you so much for coming, and let's try to fight for a more inclusive and better world. Thank you so much.